You know, for years, I think I've been guilty of being Rodin's the thinker, always trying to make everything absolutely perfect. And there's some projects that don't really require that. Take a look at this bench that I took the liberty of making for my wife for her birthday. And this was something that was made last year. She said, I just want a garden bench, something I can put a couple of pots on there, a couple of plants on, something that'll just serve the purpose of being outside and being weathered. And of course, being the woodshop teacher that I am, I said, no, everything has to be sanded. Everything has to be out of oak or walnut or maple. Whereas, there's some times where it doesn't have to be that way. Sometimes we could just make something that's utilitarian, that just does the job that it's supposed to do. Maybe something that's outside that gets weathered. That's what I think we're gonna do today. For the last few weeks, we've gone over one project after another and everything has been sanded. I had to spend time taking hours of my day to sand things up in preparation for the next step that was gonna happen. And I do spend an awful lot of time. Well, you know what, Dan? We're doing it different today. We're gonna give this little garden bench a shot. We're gonna see if we can knock this out with just the principles that we know. Things like rabbets, dados, screws. And a lot of times we're gonna look at this and say, we don't really care that something is exposed. What we're gonna do is we're gonna put this together as basic as we can and see if we can't make it look good, but not spend all the time of making it finished cabinetry. Let's take a look at something that's a little bit more finished in my garden bench. Christina worked on this Mission entry bench, which looks absolutely phenomenal. She made it out of oak. She painstakingly put the rails, the mortises in. Everything has been sanded to a fault. It's just absolutely gorgeous. It's been stained. It's been polyurethane. Everything, not a nail, a screw in the whole thing. Everything has been painstakingly done with woodworking joints. This is one extreme. This is the extreme that I normally go over. Well, today, like I said, we're gonna give the garden bench a shot. And let's take a look at the board and some things that you need to know before you ever start any project. Doesn't matter if it's a garden bench as unpolished as this or something that's as polished as Christina's entry bench that's made of oak. Let's take a look over here. What I did was I put together the garden bench bill of materials that I took off of that project that I made. I made 2 of those for my wife. And what I did was I saw what I had. I had available 2x4s, just simply structural material, nothing that's FAS or high grade or hardwood. I took the 2x4s that I picked up at Home Depot or Lowe's, and I said, I'm gonna put together something that I have out of those scrap pieces. So I had a bunch of cut-offs and I made it that size. I might be changing the size of some of these. On my garden bench, I received a whole bunch of free spruce. Probably about 4 or 5 months ago, a gentleman called up. He said, I have a bunch of wood from his shop that he works in. And he said, we're just gonna throw it out. If you could use it in your shop, that would be great. I took in a whole bunch of wood. Now, I don't know that I'm gonna use it all. And a lot of it is not really usable stock. But I think I could probably piece together a bunch of stuff that's just structural lumber that's not gonna cost me a whole lot. As a matter of fact, it's gonna cost me nothing because it's free. But if you go to Home Depot and you pick up a 2x4, remember it's a piece of wood that's 1.5 inches thick, 3.5 inches wide, an 8-foot long piece would probably cost you about maybe $3.50. In relation to 1 foot of ash, 1 board foot of ash is gonna cost you $3.50 for a piece that's this big. Well, you can get a 2x4. Granted, it's not finished and gorgeous hardwoods, but it is gonna be Douglas fir, something that'll weather outside. We use a lot of that for things like Adirondack chairs. But what I did was I put together this bill of materials, and I'm gonna go over these rough numbers. Remember, the thickness is measured first, the width is measured second, the length is measured third. On any board, The thickness is going to be the distance from surface. Remember, the surface is going to be the biggest area from surface to surface. The width of the board is going to be the distance from edge to edge, and the edge is the part that runs parallel to the direction of the grain. You can see in this board that the grain is running in this direction, so these two are edges, and the ends are the parts that run perpendicular or form 90 degrees, a 90-degree angle to the grain, the lines on that grain. This board is what we call twisted. This was one of those pieces that I got from that gentleman, and when I put it on the table, it has two major faults to it. It doesn't lay flat, and it doesn't lay flat in two directions. So if I take this and I move this, it has an obvious twist to it. Some people would refer to that as being warped or bowed or cupped. Well, it's got a twist, and the twist is the worst possible thing you could have. Because if I try to cut this, a lot of times this will cause kickback on the table saw. Even cutting on the chop saw or a radial arm saw, you'd have an issue machining this. So what I did with this board was say, hey, maybe we can use it for scrap. Maybe somebody is routing and we could use it for that. But I'm just putting it in here for now because I'm not going to use that, and I don't want that to be confused with the other materials that I have. Let's take a look at the way I'm going to attack this. I'm going to make the legs first, because as I say to most people, whenever we make a project, we always try to make it as freestanding as soon as possible. In other words, if I make a whole bunch of piece parts all at once, and I have a materials list that might list 30 different materials and sizes, what I want to do is I want to get it together so it stays as itself. So I'm only concerned about maintaining and inventorying one piece. In other words, if I could get these 4 legs together, cut, machined, and then I could put them together with this bottom support that's going to hold everything together, the top support and the stretcher, instead of having, let's see, having 9 separate pieces, I'll try to get it as one. It's ridiculous if you do the top first, because if you work on the top, then what will always happen is you're going to take the top, you're going to wait months until you get everything else done. By that time, you're either going to lose the top. If you put it in storage, it's going to get dinged, it's going to get dented. Somebody might see it as a piece of wood and say, hey, this is about the size that I want it to be. I'll just take this piece. So you run into all these issues. The top is always going to be the last thing that we're going to deal with. Our top is going to be those 3 pieces. And again, I might be changing the length on this depending on the spruce that I make, the sizes that is. So I'm going to start with the legs. I'm going to keep the size of the legs to be 14.5 inches, which isn't huge. And I have plenty of material to cut those to 14.5 inches. Then what I'll do is I'll move on to the bottom support, which I'll keep the same size. The stretcher, I don't know, because that has to do with the top, but this top support I'm going to keep as 12 inches. So what we're going to do is we're going to make 2 sides, almost like a bridge, the abutments to a bridge, and then we'll put everything together. This top, that stretcher and the top are relevant to each other's size. So this is how we're going to start. I'm going to get going on these legs, 1.5 inches by 1.5 inches. As a matter of fact, you should notice a commonality here. These are all 1.5 inches. The thickness of these pieces are 1.5 inches. Most of them are 2x6s. If you were to go to Home Depot and buy a 2x4, you're going to find out that 2x4 is 3.5 inches wide. So if they're both 1.5 inches thick and 1.5 inches wide, you could easily cut 2 widths out of each piece of 2x4. So it's another way that we can maintain the material without wasting a whole lot. We're going to take a walk back to the old chop saw where I'll see how much scrap I have and what I can get out of it. I've machined some pieces already, so just so that you know, you're going to find out that the pieces that I have are cutoffs from other projects that have been made. I got to watch myself as I walk. So take a look. This is all the stuff that we received. Mr. Lynch said that somebody called up and gave us all this material. So we were loading it into the shop one day, and the kids are saying to me, what are you going to use it for? I don't know, we'll find a project. Well, my wife's birthday is coming up, so I'm going to make her a couple more benches and see if we can't use some of this material. Like I said, some of this has been machined already. These were just scraps that people had cut, but I could definitely use these for legs, and that's what I'm going to give it a shot of. Find whatever I can machine it out of, and sometimes you get lucky. Like here's a beautiful piece of spruce. I'm just lucky out of that piece because there's no knots, anything to it. That's just a really, really nice piece. But most of this stuff has knots. Notice the edges are rough. They're in the rough. There's no nails. Luckily, there's no nails or anything. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these pieces first, and I'm going to start the machining process. Which means, let's see if I can do this the right way. I need 4 pieces that have to be 14.5 inches long. So I'm gonna get out my handy dandy tape measure, and I'm gonna, because I'm the teacher, I'm gonna select the best pieces for me. So if I look at this, like this board looks pretty clear, this board looks pretty clear. This one's not bad. I'm not gonna use that good piece. This board's pretty clear. You know what I'm gonna do? I'm going to take, let's see, can I get an inch? Yeah, I can get an inch and a half out of that. Inch and a half out of this. Inch and a half. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to take these 3 pieces. I'm going to take, do I take this piece? Can I get an inch and a half out of this piece? I get an inch and a half out of that one. Can I get an inch and a half out of this? This looks like it's a little bit shy. Cameraman pointed out this one, but this one might be a little bit shy. I'm going to take these over to the joiner. I'm going to start the machining process. Let's take a look. Come on, come on, come on. We got a lot of traveling to do today, folks. Don't dawdle. Don't dawdle. As with any jointing, which edge do I joint? It's a great question. Which edge do I joint? If I take a look at this board off the wood rack, this edge sucks. This edge sucks. Which edge do I joint? Always the better of the two. So if I look at this, I see this edge that's kind of rounded. This has been already cut. I think this is the better of the 2 edges. As a matter of fact, on all of these, one edge has been sort of machined already. Yes, I know there's a knot there. And, well, there's a knot there too, but this would take me a while to clean this up. I'm going to take all these edges that have already been cut, I'm going to joint them. How about that? Come over to my joiner. Let's do this. I don't really care how long they are. I'm hoping they're at least 29 inches so I can get 2 14.5s out of it. But I got to start someplace, and I'm going to take that machined edge. And I know it was cut by a machine. I could tell the difference. What I'm going to do is I'm going to joint it, go over to the table saw, set the fence to 1.5 inches. I'll rip it to 1.5 inches. Sleeves are rolled up. Man, it is still cool in the shop. The last video, it was freezing. I had my long sleeve Salt Lake City t-shirt, or long sleeve t-shirt on, and I had to keep the sleeves rolled down even though I was machining stuff because it was cold. Still cold today, but not as bad. What I'm gonna do is I'll turn the machine on, my jointer. Machined edge, which is the better of the two, goes down on the in-feed table. My right thumb is gonna be on the back end of the board. But the thing with this is that this board is pretty long. For me to hold this, it's a little uncomfortable. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna use the 2-hand method. My left hand holds the stock up against the fence. It also holds the stock down on the in-feed table. My other hand, my right hand, is gonna start to push. When my left hand goes over my jointer knives, I'm moving it back on my right. I'll move my right and back on my left until I get to the end. But this is still wide enough where I don't have to worry about putting my finger below the surface of the table. If I did, I could either use my push stick or my push block. I'm still pretty comfortable with this stuff. Let's give it a shot. Eyes, concentration, here we go. I move my right hand in back of my left and back of my right. my right and back of my left. I'm going to keep two hands on here. My thumb is up at a safe distance. I'm going to push that all the way through. So there's a nice machined edge. What do I do anytime I make a machined edge? Put an X on it so I know that that edge goes up against the fence on my table saw. Come on, kids, you gotta do it 3 more times. Same way. Don't dawdle. Left hand over the cutter and back of my right. Right and back of my left. And the other thing is I'm listening for a sound. I hear that sound all the way across. There's a little part that's a little raised up here. But you know, this is going to be for exterior work. So it's not like the president is going to inspect it. It's different than Christina's entry bench, which was all nice oak. We're going to leave it like that. The knot concerns me a little bit. I'll say a little prayer. I'll give it a shot. Oh, definitely heard that one. The joiner doesn't like it, but it does it. X. And you really have to be a moron not to be able to identify which is the machined edge. Hey, should I make eye contact as I walk from side to side here? It's always tricky. Left over the cutter goes the back of the right. Right over the cutter goes the back of the left. All my pressure down. And notice when I did that, I made them all in one pass for a couple of reasons. It's spruce, it's light, it's soft. So it's easy to work with. Next question, what do I have to do? I'm gonna rip these to the width that they have to be. I have a whole bunch of pieces that have to be 1.5 inches by 1.5 inches. I'm cutting these rascals to 1.5 inches wide. To do that, what do I do first? Raise the blade or set the fence? Second question, raise the blade or set the fence? Always raise the blade, because if I set this fence and now I try to see if this is the correct blade height, sometimes the fence gets in the way. So I'm going to raise this blade up. How high should the blade be up? About 1/8 to 1/16 above the work surface. So I'm going to leave it right about there. Next thing, I'm going to take my pieces, put them on the right-hand side. Again, I'm going to leave the guard down so that you guys can see me cut. I'm going to take my board, I'm going to place it up against the fence after I set the fence to 1.25 inches. So I'm sorry, 1.5 inches. Did I say 1.25 inches? I meant 1.5 inches. Right there, the fence is locked down to 1.5 inches. Kind of a dangerous cut because this blade is a lot higher than it would be if I was cutting some hardwoods 13/16 or 3/4 of an inch, but it's nothing that I can't handle if I concentrate. L with my left hand is going to hold the wood up against the fence. My thumb holds the stock down. Remember, my left hand doesn't move or else my friends will call me stubby. And my right hand is going to be on the back end. I'm going to push my stock all the way through. When I do this and I begin my cut, my right thumb is going to be here. As I continue to get closer to the blade, I'm going to hold the stock with my left, grab hold of a push stick or a push block. I'm going to push my stock all the way through. Ready? Let's do it. Always hold your stock off of the table saw so that it doesn't come in contact when you turn the saw or the machine on. Safety glasses, sleeves rolled up, no bringing back with me. L with my left hand, hold the stock up against the fence. I'll start the work. And you have to be strong with this. You cannot act like you're moving dog duty. I'm holding it. My left hand holds the stock. I can either use push stick or push block. I use push block. And I'm going to push this all the way through. There's the knot. I'll push it all the way through. So there's my board now that's 1.5 by 1.5 inches. Understand this is the surface. Understand that this is the edge. That might matter when we start to put this whole thing together. You know how hard it is to talk, like scream, and go over this stuff? And work in an environment that's dusty. It's a bit challenging. Second board, same exact way. Holding it down, holding it down. I hold it with my left. And some people I see, they hold it with their left hand like this, like they're sipping tea. Boys and girls, as we said in Vietnam, sometimes you gotta be tough. This is one of those times. You gotta be strong when you do this. 1.5 by 1.5 inches again. Exact same measurement as my other board. I'm starting to like this. This could be a bit of an issue. We'll see after I make the cut. I'm going to hold down with my left hand and block with my right. That scarf is still present, but you know, when I put this whole thing together, chances are I'm going to round over the corners of these legs. So I think I can still even use this. I get away with that. Last piece. L. Let's stick this time. Drop my left, push it all the way through. I now have 4 pieces. So now what I'm going to do is I want to figure out what I can get out of what. So if I look at this, I need those pieces to be 14.5 inches long. 29.5. Wow, somebody was watching over me. I can get, yeah, this isn't bad for 2 legs. Yeah, I'm not thrilled with that. Get a 14, no, I get 1, and I'm not thrilled about those knots. I'm not crazy about that. This board is actually pretty nice. We did use it, somebody was using this for painting, but I could scrape that off. I get a 30 out of here, so I can get 2 legs out of there. I'm not happy with that. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to assess this and say I'm going to get my legs out of these 2 pieces. I'll clean up this little bit of paint on here. I think that'll be okay. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut these pieces to 14.5 inches in length. Anybody remember how we do that? Do I know who cut these ends? I don't. So the first thing that we're going to do whenever we square up a board in terms of its length is that we have to get a reference point that we can measure from. So we're going to, let me see, let's take a walk. These boards were already cut to a workable length. What we're going to do is we have to square an end. Once we square an end, then we're going to measure them to the length that they have to be. And what we're going to do is we'll cross-cut them to the exact length. Now, these ends, is there anything I want to get rid of? Well, they're only like a 1/2 inch longer than what they have to be, so it really doesn't matter what end I square here. So what I'm going to do is take this board, and you should know, whenever I'm squaring an end, I never measure anything. All I want to do is get a reference point, so it's the easiest thing you ever did. I'm going to take my board, butt it up against my miter saw fence, slide this over till it's about midway into that saw kerf, and I'm going to bring the saw down, make a cut. Left hand all the way to the left, right hand on the handle. Now this is where I definitely want to put an X on it, because I don't know about this other end, and this end kind of looks like this one. So this is the one I know that I cut. So I'm going to square an end there. And this kind of tails off over here. I'm going to square this end, same exact way.
Put it about midway into that saw curve. Left hand all the way to the left. And that's my squared end. We need 4 pieces that have to be 14.5 inches long. 4 pieces, 14.5 inches long. So now when I measure this, I want to take a measurement from this end, my squared end, 14.5 inches over. I'm going to put a mark at 14.5. I'm going to take a tri-square, or in this case a combination square, butt it up against that area. And now what I want to do is I want to cut to the line, leaving that line. So I want to make sure that the saw blade is to the right-hand side of the line. This is going to be a pretty easy thing to do. I simply take my board, put this up against here, bring the saw down, but making sure I don't grab onto the switch. Right about there is where it has to be positioned. So I have to measure this 4 times, right? Wrong. Look, I'm not going to tell you this stuff again. I'm telling you. I got to cut 4 pieces. All have to be exactly the same length. What do I use? I want to use either a stop that I made for you because I'm a nice guy, or I could just take a board, butt it up against this fence here. Take a clamp. Tighten it down. And if I put my squared end up against that stop, all my pieces will be exactly the same length. Sometimes it moves. It might have moved a little bit. Let me move this in a little bit. I think that much. And again, it doesn't really matter that it's 14.5. What matters is that they're all exactly the same length. So I'm going to cut this one, and you'll see how easy I can get all 4 done quickly. Left hand is always going to go in between the stop and the blade. Anytime you're making a cut, try to make sure that if you have a stop set up, you're holding what's in between the stop and the blade, because if you're not, sometimes you get vibration and that piece actually could kick back. Here's my first cut. How do you think I did? I should have cut that pencil line in half. Snap. Or as we say in Linden, oh snap. How do you like that? He's got one. He doesn't have to measure the other one, butts it up against the same stop, cuts it. As they say at Staples. That was easy. Here are my 2 legs. I got to get 2 legs out of here. Remember, that's that part that tapers off. Here's my squared end. I butt it up against the stop. I don't even measure this. Is it the same exact length? It has to be, because it was cut at the same exact spot. Left hand butts it up against the I'll make my final cut. Notice I'm not reaching in for that scrap piece. I can care less about that scrap piece. This is still a little bit kind of scurvy, but what I could do is I can take this when I round this over and probably break some of that. So there are my 4 legs. Cut to the exact same length. Now, I said to you that we have a sharp edge on these. We're going to take these over to the router table and we'll route them next, just to break that. But you guys have had a lot of information today. Now, the next time I see you, we'll round these over, and then what we'll start to do is figure out the other pieces. Remember, I still have 2 pieces over there that I cut, what I can get out of that, and then we'll maybe start working on some woodworking joints. So give the garden bench a shot, and again, try to make it the size that you want, because if you have a certain amount of material, it's not going to cost you anything, or it's relatively inexpensive. Figure out what works for you, and we'll go along the way with me, and we'll see how mine comes out and see how yours comes out. Have a good one.